Yeah, let's do it. If you're ready to slice through the noise and make your message heard, you won't want to miss this one. We have the one and the only Steve Woodruff, the king of clarity, in the house. Welcome, Steve. Welcome aboard.
Jim and Chris, great to see you. Thanks for having me on board.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm excited to dig into this, but the first before we go and start talking about this, because you and I, this is going to be free consultation for me because I am about as clear as mud. So this is going to be outstanding for me. So send me the invoice later, Steve. But I got to ask you this: the king of clarity. I mean, was that something that you sort of came up with, or was this someone that said, "Here you go, here's your crown, sir"?
Yeah, someone else. Fortunately, someone came up with it for me because that is really a presumptuous title. I mean, come on.
Listen, confidence, right? I mean, hey.
Some years ago, a friend of mine on social media, Chris Brogan, wrote on my Facebook timeline, "Happy birthday to the King of Clarity." And I looked at that and I said, ooh, that is some really good branding. Do I dare take that up? And the answer was yes, I did dare take it up. So
there you go.
Because someone else gave me the title, I'm allowed to use it. And it's turned out to be phenomenal branding because, there's only one king. And
that's true.
Because somebody told me I was the king, I'm it. There you go.
Oh man, that's awesome. So you've got a couple of books, and for those of you who haven't made their way over to Amazon, please do by going Dealcasters.live. We've got those books, and we're gonna talk a lot about the contents of those books, Steve. But something else caught my eye when we were sort of preparing for the show, and that is the phrase that's emblazoned on your LinkedIn profile, sir, which is the elevator pitch is dead.
Right.
Talk about the elevator pitch being dead. I'm like, whoa, hello. I've worked so long and hard on mine.
Well, there's only two fundamental problems with the elevator pitch. Okay. Number one, nobody wants to be pitched. And number two, nobody wants to talk in an elevator. Other than that, it's a fine term. Now, the concept of the elevator pitch, having a compressed message, is great. But it's not compressed enough the way people are talking about it. And it's too much telling and selling. And so I think you need a 15 to 20 second way of introducing yourself that's compelling, that draws people in to say, ooh, what's that mean? And tell me more. And that's what I call a memory dart. And I believe that the best way to introduce yourself is with a memory dart. So here's the question we all have to answer, who knows how many times a year. Steve, what do you do? And the way we answer that question either opens the door to opportunity or it's boring. So what I do, one of my memory darts is somebody says, Steve, what do you do? I say, I help people answer that very question in a way that's interesting and not boring. Called a memory dart. And then they have to ask, what's a memory dart? And off we go. And so everybody should have a way of introducing themselves that is sticky and a hook and interesting and lets you get to the point of what your real value is all about.
I love that. And I think, if there's ever a better time then to do this, it's now, because listen, I hear the words, this phrase "short attention spans" so much, and vertical video and AI and all these platforms are just the surge is very high, and people will say, well, everybody's attention spans are shorter. Maybe that's true to a degree, but do you feel like maybe people just have less patience for the muck that they have to wade through in order to get to what they need?
Well, one of the more interesting books that was written back in the 70s or 80s was The Attention Economy. And this author was writing about the fact that the most important commodity is people's attention, and it's getting harder and harder to win it. Now, I was around for the 70s and 80s. I was around for the 60s. And how much harder is it now when the average American is looking at a screen 7 hours a day, when the average number of times we pick up this device is, between 150 and 300 times a day? The fight for attention is just simply hugely challenging and just keeps getting worse, which means that for us, we have to be that much more skillful and that much more quick to be able to win that battle for somebody's attention.
I love that. So let me ask you this, Steve. Like, who are some good examples that you can maybe cite other than yourself? Because so you'll have to, as the king of clarity, you'll have to, you'll have to look down the org chart a little bit and kind of like who in your opinion have great examples of using that memory dart and being memorable and hooky with answering that question.
Well, one of the newest acolytes that's become very effective is my youngest son. So my youngest son, Seth, I have 5 grown boys. He has recently taken on a job where he's doing photography work with a traditional camera and with a drone. And is part of this company offering where they document the progress of a construction site in a building over time. And they document it with all these different pictures. And he said, "Dad, you've been talking about this term memory dart, and my title is documentation specialist." And I said, "Well, Seth, that's pretty boring. Let's see what we can do with that." Yeah. And I'm driving to the gym, talking to him, and he's in his car driving. And I said, "Well, Seth, how about this? Introduce yourself next time this way. I get paid to fly drones and take pictures." And sure enough, we get off the phone. 5 minutes later, he gets pulled over by a policeman because his right rear brake light is out. And the cop comes up and asks him what he does. And Seth says, "Well, may as well." And he says, "I get paid to fly drones." And started in this conversation with this policeman. And, he's just a 20-something kid. But here's the thing. Anybody can be good at this. Anybody. You just have to find an interesting way to say what you do. And so you don't have to be some highfalutin actor or some high-paid social media maven. You just find an angle in what your work is, and then you come up with a way, like Jim would say, the Marine way of doing things. Okay, what's the Marine way of doing things, Jim? And then Jim has a chance to open up. So memory darts are for anybody. Everybody can have one.
So I have to ask, did your son get a ticket?
No, he got off.
Okay. So it worked in 2 ways then. He was memorable and didn't get a ticket. I love it.
Exactly. Yeah. I can't guarantee, future results, but,
Disclaimer on the memory darts. I think everybody heard that. Awesome. Jim, I know you had a question.
Sure.
Yeah. So, Steve, Chris and I with Dealcasters, a lot of times, like when we wrap up the show, we say, don't fear the gear. But I guess, is that really a memory, or do you think maybe there's a better way for us? Like when people say, well, what's Dealcasters about? I think that's something that we probably hadn't thought about before, because it's like, oh, well, we have this show, right? We start blabbering. Oh, we have this show, we have people on, and sometimes we don't. And
well, to be clear, you blabber, Jim. I don't blabber at all.
True.
I'm not. Yeah. No, I'm kidding.
All right, so this is my favorite thing to do, by the way. Do it live right now. Okay.
Okay.
Don't fear the gear is cute, but I don't know what you're trying to tell me. I'm not afraid of gear. I don't know what gear you mean. Fear. What's that all about? So it's a sort of a memorable little tagline, but it doesn't give me a visual of what you're doing. So answer me this. What is the point of Dealcasters? What are you trying to accomplish? Besides make $1 million, have a massive audience. Yeah. Okay. Let's be a little more noble. What are you actually trying to do here?
We'll get right back to the show, but first, I wanted to tell you about the School of Podcasting, the #1 place to learn about podcasting, brought to you by the amazing Podcast Hall of Famer, Dave Jackson. I'm a member, and it's a fantastic place for podcast courses, a super helpful podcast community, and unlimited, that's right, unlimited podcast coaching. The link to check it out is here in the show notes, or you can head on over to sop.dealcasters.live and tell Dave that Dealcasters sent you. Now back to the show. Jim?
Chris, I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna let you go first.
You're the one that asked him the question.
Yeah, but you're the one that wanted the consulting.
Okay, you're making me squirm now, Steve. This is good stuff. This is good stuff for all the folks that are listening and watching. The point really, and the original point that when Jim and I got into this is we're remote producers, and we are constantly doing what you're seeing right now for other people. And we are constantly in the process of explaining the tech and the gear and coaching people through this process. So we created a show where we could demonstrate what we did while creating inspirational content for others for them to do it themselves.
Okay.
So that was the lobbyist thin dart that threw into the air, but that gives you the concept of it.
I think the other thing is we want to help people kind of overcome that hurdle. And what drives us is that when we have people like say, after watching your show, I went out, I bought this microphone and I'm starting my podcast or my show or whatever. So that's kind of what ultimately drives us. So I don't know if that helps or hurts our dart.
Okay. So don't fear the gear doesn't necessarily right off the bat tell me it's about podcasting. It also doesn't necessarily tell me how you're going to help me. You're encouraging me to have a disposition, but I don't know why. So, and it's right off the top of my head, I'll send the invoice later if you really like it.
Please.
But anyway, podcasting, it's way easier than you think. Now I know what you're talking about, and now I know what you're going to do for me, or at least you're going to show me something, because podcasting, if you're not into it, is intimidating, like everything else that's new. First time you publish a book, it's intimidating. Starting a podcast, intimidating. Starting a blog, intimidating. Starting a business, intimidating. So the fear part that you're talking about is there. Intimidation is a real big problem with anything else, but you've got to give people a little more information of how you're going to help them overcome their fear of something specific. You see how that works? Got to be a little more precise so that I know what problem you're fixing and what pain you're taking away.
Got it. So if I'm going to put this into a formula, Steve, which I know you talk a lot about, it's about identifying maybe identifying a problem that you solve for a specific type of person. Is that accurate, or did I miss one of the steps, or is that kind of like the general formula?
The core, what I say is, look, everybody's got to have a core value proposition. And the core value proposition for any company, any brand, any person, any consultant is this: I fix this felt pain for this specific type of person or company using this superpower. That's the core of it. If you can create that one sentence and fill in those 3 blanks, you've got the core of a value proposition. Now, once you can say that, then coming up with a nice little memory dart twist to introduce, it might be a different phrase, but it's going to lead right to that value proposition, okay? So a great introduction involves a statement, that's a value proposition, and a clever way of drawing people into that value proposition. And if you've got a nice, clear way of saying, this is the problem we fix, not only is that great for selling and networking, it's actually the core of your strategic direction as a company. You've got to be clear on exactly who you're serving and exactly how you're serving them.
So what do you think with the tons of people that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, what do you think is, what are some of the common mistakes or maybe some of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're putting this thing together? Is it too many words? Is it running to ChatGPT and letting that rubber stamp your content out the other side? Or what are some of the mistakes that people are making?
Two main mistakes. First one is TMI, too much information. We try to say too much. Constant problem. We want to pack about 27 thoughts into our opening. That's part of the reason why the elevator pitch is not effective. It's too much. And the human brain is not ready to process that much information and work that hard right off the bat. You've got to give me a quick light on and a quick value. The second thing is that then it becomes, if it's not too many words, it's generic words. Okay. So if you open up and say, we provide podcasting solutions and services for people.
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
You and a million others. That's
Right.
generic. That is not telling me what your unique angle is, what your superpower is, how you're fixing things. So genericness and TMI-ness are the two biggest problems. And when you're in the corporate world, part of the generic problem is also jargon, throwing a bunch of jargon in that says absolutely nothing, but it sounds impressive, when in fact you actually just totally turn the person's mind off.
Right. Yeah, or an acronym that only a specific, subset of people really know, right? Is the other thing that I'm working with a client now, and they're throwing out all these acronyms, and I'm like, pretend I'm in 8th grade. Did you say that? And they're like, well, this is high level stuff. Well, stop making it to the people feel stupid when they don't understand what you're saying, right? And that may be part of the thing, right? Do you feel like if somebody gives information that they think makes them sound smart, that someone else is reacting like, I don't even know what they're talking about. I must not be smart enough to be in this room.
The funny thing with jargon is, at a very high level, high corporate level, it's a great moneymaker, because the people that are using the jargon, the big consulting groups and all those, and they're accompanying their jargon with all these 100-point slide PowerPoint decks, all this fluff that sounds good and sounds like best practices and blah, blah, blah. And the people they're selling it to, executives, that's what they want. They want something like that that's fluffy and generic, but it sounds like it's expertise, so that they can blame those people if it doesn't work out. So there's this one strata where it works, but for the rest of life, it's nonsense. And so I just don't like jargon at all, and I don't like generic, meaningless information. And the way I illustrate that most commonly is I ask people this, and in 15 plus years, nobody, and I mean nobody, individuals, groups, has ever been able to answer this question. What's on the side? What's written on the side of a UPS truck? Now, we've all seen a UPS truck thousands and thousands of times. People know there's a logo there, UPS, and people know it's brown. But there are two phrases that UPS uses on their vehicles. Sometimes it's both, sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other, and they do not stick. Okay? So the first one is worldwide services.
Oh.
Services? What
generic.
Does that mean?
Yeah.
It means absolutely nothing.
Wow.
And no way can anybody process that. No way does it turn a light on, and it's not memorable. Worldwide services. It's a technically accurate description, but it's junk as far as being able to actually make an impression. The second is worse. Synchronizing the world of commerce.
Oh my God.
So that is aimed at a tiny percentage of people that are executives in supply chain management and logistics. They understand that UPS has this whole back office logistical engine, and it's very impressive. They are a logistical machine. But you're putting this message on a truck that's driving around neighborhoods delivering packages to normal human beings who have no idea what it means to synchronize the world of commerce, nor do they care. And they have 130,000 vehicles, trucks, vans, planes, emblazoned with phrases that nobody knows.
We'll get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about Stream Like a Boss with the amazing Tanya Smith. Whether you're a coach, consultant, or creator, Tanya's got that magic to turn your live streaming skills into a powerful lead generation engine, transforming those chirping crickets into cash-paying clients with a revolutionary boss framework. The link to check it out is here in the show notes, or you can head on over to streamlikeaboss.tv. Hey, and tell Tanya that Dealcasters sent you. Now back to the show.
But what's funny is I don't know if you guys remember a few years back they had a commercial, and that's what I was thinking of is like, what can Brown do for you?
What can Brown do for you? Which would be better, right? I mean, at least you're memorable. I mean, it's at least you have some sort of like
they were trading on the one thing that people do recognize, brown.
Right.
But personify a color, especially the brown color, is a really dumb move. The other dumb one they did was a campaign called We Love Logistics. And everybody's running around, jumping around saying we love logistics. I got to tell you, nobody loves logistics. And don't try to make the average American who doesn't even know what logistics are get excited about the fact that a bunch of people in brown uniforms love logistics. It's I don't know who runs their marketing, but something's.
I love analytics.
Exactly.
So Steve, do you then? I mean, this sounds to me like. Tell me. I mean, I know you're a keynote speaker, obviously an author. Do you work with companies to work on their branding like this? Is this, or is it individuals to work on more of the memorable memory dart stuff, or is it more of the work sitting in with marketing teams and working on creating memorable content like that?
So I do a lot with individuals because that's where my passion is. My passion is with individuals, people. And by the way, this isn't just for consultants or solopreneurs or entrepreneurs and startups. I do this with people in career transition. So individuals that are trying to figure out their value proposition, how do they position themselves with a company to be hired? It's branding. It's personal branding in that case, personal professional branding. So I work a lot with individuals, and then I work with corporations on their brand messaging, what their core message is, how are they going to put it on, say, a trade show booth, how are they going to do it on their website, how do they appear on LinkedIn. I'm not an agency, so I don't do the execution part of marketing, but I do help people arrive at the core identity and package of messaging. And the process for that is exactly the same, whether it's a 20-year-old documentation specialist in his car with his drone, or whether it's a massive corporation. It all comes down to distilling the message in great words.
Speaking of distilling great messages, we have our friend Jody Krangle, who's joined us over here on Amazon. She's waving hi, and she's apparently is a big fan of yours because she's cheerleading you from Amazon. We're a big fan of Jody. She's been on the show. Voice that melts like butter in your ears. Jody Krangle, thank you for joining us.
That is a memory dart. Okay, that's a great because it's vivid. It creates a picture. And it's true to Jody because her voice is warm. She's got a warm voice. I told you that when I met her. There's this certain professional warmth to it. But you can say professional warmth, and then you can say melt like butter. Melt like butter in your ear. Absolutely memorable.
And actually, if butter was melting in my ears, it probably wouldn't be super comfortable. Not as comfortable as like listening to Jody talk about whatever. She can read the phone book.
But you're gonna remember it,
right? That's all that matters. Jim, you had a question.
Yeah. So Steve, and you talked about this in the Zoom meeting we had, but you also talk about this in your book. And one of your other sons, which I thought that's where you're going to go originally, he, as you said, actually listened to you, and he started Whiskey with a View. And of course, just when you think of that, right, it definitely is memorable. And so what kind of, I guess, how did you help him come up with that? Because I'm sure there were all kinds of other thoughts in that. And I guess the other part of that question is like, if you're doing, maybe that's the danger, right? We're not doing just one thing. If you're doing different things, I guess you have to maybe have more than one dart.
Yeah. Let me pick up that part first, and then I'll talk about Nate. So
Yep.
Most people, when they are in business, they do more than one thing. So what I say is you've got to have a lead horse. You need a lead message, one flag that's going to be your main thing. If you have other things that you can have in your back pocket, that once somebody knows you, trusts you, talking to you, then you can say, oh, by the way, I also do this if you need that. Or, by the way, I also do this. But you don't want to confuse people by coming right up front and saying, I do 4 things, because they won't remember you for any of them. So I do more than clarity, but clarity is the main thing. And that's all I want you to remember. Later on, if you want to find out about this or that, that's fine. So I always encourage people, even if you do a few things, you've got to pick your lead horse, and you've got to try to stick that one thing into the mind, because people don't have 15 memory slots for you. They're going to have one. So pick your pigeonhole and embrace it and put yourself in that pigeonhole and own it. So my son, Nate, he and I started exploring the world of bourbon and whiskey some years ago together. I never had any interest really in whiskey before then. And he was working as a bartender. And we both started to just explore, and we really liked it. And we started to have our own little unofficial tastings together, and we would read up on it and try to figure this out. And Nate's always been a great photographer and a highly creative person. And he glommed onto this stuff, and he really started to develop a passion and a great palate for whiskey. And he started networking effectively in the industry. He got to know brand ambassadors, got to know distillers. And then he started taking these beautiful pictures of whiskey in nature. And Nate's very much a nature guy, hiking guy. And he was composing these lovely shots. And he started this Instagram thing, Whiskey with a View. Whiskey has not traditionally been marketed by anything but old school, old guys. It's an old guy's club. And Nate's this young buck who's creating these beautiful pictures, and he's looks like a Viking, and he's got young and vigorous, and he had his dog, and the whole thing. And he just started doing these fabulous pictures, and he started developing quite a following. And now he's over 80,000 people on Instagram. And that began to get him more opportunities to work with other brands. And they started to pay him for his pictures and pay him for posts. And then he got some brand ambassador positions. And now he's been approached a couple years ago by some venture capital folks who are helping him stand up his own brand. And hopefully the first whiskey will be released next year and he's the face of the brand. So he took this interest and moved it all the way up the scale into influence and then business, just by being passionately devoted and using his talents and staying laser focused on it.
That is so cool. And it probably helps that his dad gave him some memory darts to put in his pocket along the way, right? And helping. And something tells me you had more than just your DNA along for the ride there. That there was definitely some free consultation happening there with you and your son and how he helped to build that business. That's incredible. Any stories that where you helped him with clarity along the way?
All along the way. So we brainstormed constantly all along the way as he started to develop this thing. And so I don't know how many times we went back and forth, but I think one of the most memorable times we had was he was with a brand at that point, Whistle Pig, and they were doing tastings at this event with a whole bunch of other distillers up in Kentucky. And he said, "Dad, why don't you come up for the weekend and help me?" And I said, "Sure." And so he had his little booth there, and I knew enough, and I picked up enough of his lingo that I kind of knew the advantages. And we were then both just doing tastings, and it was like I was part of the team. I mean, I may as well have been another Whistle Pig brand ambassador. And we had the best time just selling stuff together. And it was just this incredible bonding time where we were doing his whiskey thing together. And so we've had many, many moments like that. And it's just been a delight to escalate the discussion up from dad and kid to, co-conspirators, strategic business, marketing. It's just a blast.
Yeah, as a father, that's one of the things that my kids are not interested in podcasting or production, right? And so it's just not always. But you end up finding something that you can do together. For my youngest son, it's Detroit sports. For my oldest son, we go to shows together. Like you end up finding something, but it's almost like there's still a part of me that wishes like, yeah, but why don't you just do a podcast about that? And then all of a sudden they're interested in it. So it's really cool that you were able to not, bonding with your son along the way and being able to do that and also utilize your expertise and kind of letting him sort of let that bird fly out of the nest and see that success story is incredibly cool. I wanted to pause for a bit because we're talking about more whiskey than books here. And you wrote a couple of great books. This show's not about whiskey, but today it was for 15 minutes. But there's a couple of books you wrote, and I wanted to dig in a little bit if I could. First one here, the most recent one is The Point, and that's available on Amazon. It's called The Point: How to Win with Clarity-Fueled Communications. I bet there's a memory dart in that subtitle that you used there because that clarity fueled and so you talk about is it the clarity fuel formula in this book? Talk a little bit about that clarity fuel formula, if you would. We'll get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about Social Media News Live. Jeff C. and his amazing guests will keep you up to date on what's happening in this entire changing world of social media. They talk with industry experts and innovators and creators about the latest social media news, tips, and tactics, and they broadcast live, so you can ask the questions that matter most to you and your business. Jim and I love this show, and we know that you will too. Head over to socialmedianewslive.com. Hey, tell them Dealcasters sent you. Now back to the show.
So when I wrote my first book, which is called Clarity Wins, that was about having nice compressed messages to try to move your business to a referral base. Because part of the reason for putting these memory darts into people's minds is you want them to know exactly what you do, who you do it for, so they can refer you. Because we all know that the best business is referral business. But most people don't have a referral strategy. So that whole book is about coming up with these compact messages, these memory darts, and how to brand yourself, how to love your pigeonhole, and how to plant your message in people's minds effectively. But even as I released that book in 2018, I had been doing workshops for my corporate clients on other parts of communication. Project management, internal collaboration, all this stuff. And I had this crazy idea. Maybe there is actually one formula for all human communication, not just a selling formula, a marketing formula, a coaching formula, a blah, blah, because, there are thousands of these systems with all their own acronyms, all their own stuff. But when you read them and you look at them, you go, a lot of this is the same. So I worked for years, especially during the pandemic years, to try to figure out if I could boil it all down to a formula. And I did. And so the point is a distillation of that. It's 4 rules and 8 memory dart tools that anybody can apply and it can apply to any role, any person, any language, anything. It's just human communication. And so this it's a handbook basically, and it starts out with these two fundamental aha realities that your customer is the human brain. You got to understand how the brain works, what it wants. The brain is processing 11 million bits of information per second from all five senses. And to gain focus, you have to win the 60-bit battle. When you're looking at somebody and talking, that's a 60-bit information flow. You're competing with 11 million bits. And you've got to get through the brain's master filter, which is called the reticular activating system. And it turns out that the key to getting through the reticular activating system is a very simple acronym that we all know, WIIFM. What's in it for me?
Yeah.
You have to lead with something new, interesting, and relevant, and then the brain goes, oh, I want to listen to Jim. But if you go blah, 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 and it's not relevant, the 11 million bits are going to wipe you out all the time. So the moment of opportunity is winning that 60-bit focus. And the thing you got to understand as a marketer, salesperson, podcaster, dad, teacher, preacher, is you've got to win the 60-bit battle. So brain-friendly communication. Human brain is your customer. And then the second thing is we all have not only the same customer, we all have the same competition, which is the noise, the vast tsunami of noise that competes with us. And so your competition isn't that company or that person or that brand. Your competition is the noise. And therefore, we have to learn how to get right to the point and win that battle. And so the rest of the book explains the 4 rules, which are very simple. You have to have a point. That does help. You have to get right to the point quickly to get through the RAS. You've got to get the point across, which means you've got to arrive at understanding and memory. And that's where the memory darts come in. And then the goal is to get on the same page, to reach alignment and agreement. So that simple 4 steps for anything from email to writing a book to journalism to broadcast, everything. Those are the 4 steps to making great communication. And then the 8 tools, the 8 memory dart tools, all start with S. These are the brain-friendly things that you can use to get right into somebody's head. A little statement, a snippet, a story, a statistic, a side-by-side comparison. And I list out 8 S's. And one of my favorites is symbolic language. Okay, so king of clarity is symbolic language. It's a word picture. If Jim is the Mercedes of something or other,
oh
that's
my God!
symbolic language.
We got to bring that. We got to bring that.
Can we make it a Porsche instead?
He's like the Jeep.
Yeah.
Can we like a Jeep?
The Jeep.
Yeah. But what you've done is you've taken something that's already in somebody's head.
Yep.
It has a whole bunch of characteristics, and you've just simply attached Jim to it, and you've made a picture. And it's so much better than coming up with a whole white paper of bullet points about Jim, which nobody's going to remember.
Right.
So the editor for my books, Josh Bernoff, I worked on him for his memory dart. And I said, well, Josh, basically, you're the Mercedes of business book editors. Well, he liked Teslas. So he decided he was the Tesla of business book editors.
Does he still like them?
Well, he likes his Tesla. He's not so sure about...
Right. He hasn't put an apology bumper sticker on it yet?
Yeah. But that's the thing. These are things we've known forever. This is not like... I'm not some PhD rocket science. We've all known that symbolic language and stories and snippets and all this... This is how... it goes back into the great old books. The Bible is full of memory darts. Full. So, it does not require any kind of advanced degree to apply the 4 rules and the 8 tools. It's just...
Yeah, you are being humble to a degree, because I feel like it sounds simple, but it's hard for people to do this, or else you wouldn't be unemployed. You wouldn't be getting paid money to do this stuff. It's hard. Why is it so hard for people to do this?
I think it's because we fundamentally don't understand unless we stop and think about it. And most people don't have time to stop and think about it. We don't understand what the human brain is looking for. And I put it this way, the brain wants what it wants the way it wants it. Now, you can go with the rules or you can break the rules. It's up to you. But the human brain isn't going to change. It's fundamentally wired the way it's wired, which means you've got to be simple, brief, vivid, and memored. You don't have a choice. Well, that or you're just going to be forgettable. And we tend to think that if information has been transmitted, communication has happened. Absolutely not true.
Yeah.
I sent that in an email. Yeah. An email that was this long
Right.
and packed with 47 other distracting things. Yeah, you shared information. You didn't communicate. And you've sat through speeches, you've sat through conferences where somebody will get up and they'll put up that slide with 6,000 bullet points and boxes and arrow. And you're just going, I have no idea what the point is here.
Right.
And the presenter thinks, well, I've shown you the information. You've not communicated.
Yeah, it's like it's so many people, Steve, talk to whether it's clients we deal with or not, and they talk to us. They think that we're quote unquote social media experts, which is like, if you call yourself that, I mean, come on, you're not privy to all the algorithms. But they're like, well, I'm posting every day, I'm putting this stuff out there, and there are these basically trumpets of information, expecting that that's going to land and that people will be social and communicate back on social media. Do you feel like this apply? A lot of these things apply in the social media context as well.
A lot of my philosophy was hammered out by jumping into the social media world early when it started, and it was Twitter that forced me and many others to learn the art of brevity. So when I went to college, it was long form. So I learned how to write long form. I learned logical dissertation, and all very valuable stuff. It's great stuff. I'm a good writer, but I had to throw it all away when we started hitting the Twitter era. And then I realized that actually Twitter was onto something. This is a universal law. Get it down to the essence or you lose the opportunity.
We're going to get right back to the show, but first I wanted to introduce you to the amazing Cloudlifter CL1 from Cloud Microphones. This amazing little blue box boosts your dynamic podcast mic signal for pristine audio quality in just seconds. Jim and I love ours, and you can snag one of these CL1s or new Cloudlifter X's for yourself from the links in the show notes below. Elevate your audio content with the Cloudlifter. Now, back to the show. Yeah, YouTube just extended their time on what they call shorts, which is their vertical video, and it went from 59 seconds to 3 minutes, and everybody was like, "Oh, I can put a 3-minute version, a clip on social media." And I was like, "Hang on. Make sure that the extra 2 minutes that you're putting on is valuable, or you're not going to get, like, your stuff's not going to get seen or heard." Which is really the point. Yeah.
So here's a quick question for you. We're going to see, probably, I'm going to guess Jim's going to get this one faster, but we'll see.
Oh,
maybe.
Ouch.
All right. Who gave the Gettysburg Address?
Jim Hughes.
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln. How long was the Gettysburg Address?
18 minutes. I don't know.
2 minutes.
Wow.
However, there was a great, more famous orator that gave a speech same day as Lincoln. What was his name?
Oh, it was in your book. I forgot.
That's right.
Because it was so long, but I remember Abraham Lincoln because it was short.
Yeah. Edward Everett, 2 hour eloquent speech.
Wow.
That nobody now knows, nobody remembers, nobody knows his name. Abe Lincoln got right to the point, and he used very juicy, vivid language, and it stuck. There's nothing new under the sun.
Jim, you got it right. You've earned the next question. I'll sit down.
So Steve, and it's interesting because I don't know if it's just been some of the guests that we've recently picked, but you're kind of hitting on this common theme about stories. And so I think where, I know I struggle with it sometimes. I don't know if Chris struggles because Chris is smarter than me. But do you have any advice on how to share the right stories?
Yeah.
Especially when it gets into these darts.
So I encourage every single human being, every professional, and this is for networking purposes and introductory purposes. You want to have at least 3 brief stories. And I have an exercise that I now do. I call it a pre-note. So at conferences, you want to help people to network effectively. So you have keynote packages, people speaking. But what I have proposed for people is something I call a pre-note. It's a half-hour exercise where I lead people, the entire group, into developing 3 memory dart stories that they can then use during that conference and afterwards to introduce themselves more effectively. Those 3 stories are your origin evolution story, how you got to where you are now. And that is always a fascinating story. Everybody has a different one, and there's always some kind of twist, some kind of unexpected change, something happened, and it's memorable. When you tell that story, it's memorable. So you've got to have a good origin evolution story, and you want to keep it like up to a minute. The second story you want to have is an outstanding success story. So I was in this situation and my customer said, we've got to have this and we got to have it by next Thursday. And we came through and we nailed this thing. And the result was $2 million in revenue and a repeat customer for the next 5 years. And if the success story illustrates your value, what else do you got to say? You've just made the point, nailed it, and made it very memorable. The third one, which is for fun, is your coulda, shoulda, woulda story. So this was a course you might have tried to take, thought you were going to take, whatever. So when I do this story, I still tell people when I went to college, went to Vanderbilt, I was going to go to be an astronomer. I was fascinated with all things space, loved astronomy. And I thought, and they had a good astronomy program, and I had a scholarship to go to Vanderbilt. So I said, okay, do that. Then I ran into physics and calculus. And that was the end of that quest. Turned out astronomy is mostly formulas and physics. It's not just looking up at beautiful nebulae and galaxies. It's hard work. And what I discovered in college is that I love ideas and words. I don't love numbers. I love words and ideas. So I ended up majoring in psychology, totally changed my course, went into business, and have been dealing with ideas and words ever since. And so coulda, woulda, shoulda. Yeah, I still love space stuff. But, I got waylaid because I was on the wrong track. And everybody has a story like that. So if you walk into any situation, you have those stories, you have a great way of connecting with people. And then turning it the other way. In one of the books, I talk about story asking. Storytelling is wonderful. But what you want to do is be a story asker. You want to say, Jim, how did you get to this position? I'm going to get your origin story out of you. Or where did you think you were going when you were in high school? So I'll say, Chris, I'll bet you didn't have in your high school yearbook some goal of being a podcast producer. What were you thinking back then?
Yeah.
And the best networking skill is story asking, because what you're really doing is interviewing, you're being curious, you're drawing out. And I'll sit down with somebody and 45 minutes in, they'll say, wait a minute, I don't know anything about you. Yeah, it's because I've been asking you stories and drawing you out, and everybody wants to tell their stories. Great.
Very Dale. It's like Dale Carnegie. That's
it's a great sales technique too, right?
Oh,
get them talking, right? Get them talking, and they'll tell you what they want, right? And not obviously not with the intention of doing it. It's also a great podcast host technique right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So if you're someone who has a podcast, this is fantastic and very useful information as well. Like, because I think in a lot of ways, Steve, people, when they have a podcast and they're hosting a podcast, they make it too much about themselves, and it's not really what that's about. Some of the best and most informative podcasts, the actual host speaks, less than 20% of the time.
That's how it should be.
Yeah, exactly how it should be. You're right. So this show, really, a lot of the people that we serve are podcasters, live streamers, entrepreneurs that either we've helped along the way or are just like, they're getting nuggets of information from smarter astronomers than we are. But I wanted to like, would there be some advice for crafting memory darts for podcasters that, obviously a lot of the stuff that a lot of podcasters do is putting together this information, putting the content together, and sort of throwing it over the fence, as it were,
Right.
and just hoping that it lands, and then trying to build a community. They have a struggle with building and really having the patience to do it, which is, there's not a lot you can do about it. But you just have to create a space where people can be a part of this community. Any advice for someone who is struggling with that? I know that the shows can differ from who they serve and what the topics are and things like that. But a lot of this material is evergreen, and it applies across a multitude of different companies of varying levels. Anything more specific maybe for podcasters?
I think in general, when you're going to write an article or do a podcast or make a presentation or whatever, you want to settle on a very intriguing lead message. Okay. So we've covered a lot of topics here, whiskey and memory darts and astronomy and whatever. You're going to have to pick one thing that is most likely to get somebody to go, what's that all about? I got to listen to this. And with each guest, you're going to touch on 5, 10, however many different things, but you're going to have to select. And you want to do this probably ahead of the show with the guests and say, look, of all the things we're going to talk about, what's your point? I mean, that's the first of the 4 rules of communication. You got to have a point. So
Right.
what's our point that we're going to put forward about this podcast? If it's just, here's an interesting talk with an interesting guest, there's a lot of those out there.
Right.
You need an angle. So everybody's got to have an angle. And part of what I do, and I do brand consulting with companies and individuals, is we arrive at your angle, the thing that makes you really intriguing, cool, exceptional, and remarkable. If you're familiar at all with Seth Godin, his book, Purple Cow, made a massive impression on me. And the point of the title of that book, Purple Cow, is this book is how are you going to be remarkable? You can drive past 1,000 cows on the side of the road and not say a thing about any of them. But if you see a purple cow, you're going to talk about that purple cow. And so what we've got to do is we've got to find our purple cow message as a brand or in any particular podcast and say, this is the intriguing thing. Don't miss this thing.
Wow. What about content creators that don't feel like their content's getting any traction, right? And then they start to get in their own heads, right?
Mm-hmm.
They start to, like it's just not resonating with people.
Yeah.
They feel like they have a mission. They have like, this is definitely the point that I want to. I mean, what are some of the ways that they can pivot off of that and still continue to serve the people that they want to serve?
Part of that is you've got to have some people around you that are really smart that you can just bounce stuff off of. So I have a mastermind that I work with. I have a number of other consultants that I talk to a lot. And I need clarity just as everybody else does. So one of the phrases I've made famous, although I didn't make it, I don't think anybody knows it, is this: you can't read the label of the jar you're in. We're very subjective. We only see ourselves in a certain way. We don't always see our strengths. We don't always see what's best.
Yeah.
So I will tell you that after the release of the point, I thought, look, I've come up with something absolutely astounding. A universal formula for clear communications. This is really awesome. Okay. I thought it was. I still think it is.
Okay.
But it wasn't selling that well. The message is too big. Who's in charge of clear communications in an entire, or it's like it all needed to be written, but it wasn't sticking. It wasn't landing. But what started to happen last year, as I was interacting with some of my smart people around, was that this concept of memory dart, which I introduced back in 2018, it wasn't even the main point of the first book. But that memory dart thing kept coming back. People kept saying, that's the coolest thing ever. And I just kind of, yeah, memory dart. And now I've actually completely altered my message to make memory dart the lead. It was there all along. But I needed other people to tell me, hey, that's your really crucial message, is the memory dart. And then what was even cooler was one of these guys said to me, we were doing his brand message, and I've got, as I mentioned, the 8 tools in here, the clarity tools: statement, snippets, specifics, stories, stakes. What's at stake? That's important to the brain. There's got to be a benefit. Symbolic language, side by sides, and summaries. So I was talking to this guy, and we were working on his brand message, and he said, I went back to my room. I was building a slideshow. I made every single slide its own memory dart. And I thought, ooh, I've been thinking too narrowly about memory darts. I've been thinking about introductions and referrals. I haven't been thinking about memory dart broad. And then I realized, wait a minute, those 8 tools I've identified, those are memory dart tools. I hadn't identified them as memory dart tools, but that's what they are.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, my second book became subordinate to my first book because the memory dart concept is my lead message. But I needed other people to tell me that because I was too immersed in it.
You're in your own jar.
Yeah,
I'm totally going to use that. I am definitely going to, give you credit for that. But that's a memory dart in itself. The whole, in the jar, you can't read the front of the label. It is very true. We are huge believers in surrounding yourself with, smarter people around you that will give you the information you need to move forward, not just the information you think you want to hear, right? And a lot of times we're like, well, let me run this by my wife, or actually my wife will definitely give me a constructive or deconstructive criticism. Maybe that's a bad example. Family members, things like that, they're going to want to tell you stuff to have, because you're in a relationship with these people for a long term, right? But in a lot of ways, surrounding yourself, masterminds, mentors, coaches, all of these things we're big believers in, because if you're going to get better, you can't just work out of that bubble of yours. You've got to surround yourself with people. Not everybody else is going to, not everybody else is right. But I mean, I think that's a powerful story because, you poured years into these books and all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, wait a minute. This was right in front of me, and it took somebody else going, hey, this is what you got to do. So, ladies and gentlemen, I can't believe the time has flown by as much as it has. Go to stevewoodruff.com, and of course, if you and why wouldn't you, go to Amazon, get The Point: How to Win with Clarity Fueled Communications. And you just sold me on this one. Clarity wins, get heard, get referred. And the memory dart concept there, and we didn't even touch on referrals, which, it's like, there's so much about that I wanted to ask you about, but we are right up against time. Steve, this has been just incredibly awesome. Thank you so much for not only the time, but the amount of value that you brought to the show. Thank you for making the show better today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's been great talking to you guys. And I love it when people I'm talking to that are on podcasts get it. You see it. You see what's going on, and you get the value of it. And sometimes I feel like I'm just a wolf howling in the wilderness and nobody's listening. But I know the value of it. Because I've seen people's lives change by just getting clarity of who they are and how to say it. I've seen so many people change that I'm not quitting.
Dan, and nor should you. I mean, especially now, so many people are just farming out this kind of stuff to AI, thinking it's going to just land, and it's just not. This is where the human can separate themselves from everyone else. That's just adding to this pile of mediocrity that no one's paying attention to, which is happening a lot. Right. And so I think your work here is even more important now than ever.
Yep, Chris, I'm getting off the elevator and just using darts from now on.
That's right. Don't put a dartboard in an elevator.
Stop that pitching, Jim.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone who's joined. And, as always, podcasting, it's not as hard as you think it is.
That's right.
Thanks for listening to Dealcasters. Congratulations. You've taken another step forward in your content creation journey. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe or follow button here in your favorite podcast player so you can be reminded every time we drop an episode.
We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. And if you're wanting to watch our shows live on Amazon, feel free to follow Dealcasters Live as well at dealcasters.live.
Follow us on Twitter or subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we also included added content that you cannot find anywhere else.
If you have questions about this episode or have something you want us to review, you can also email us at dealcasters@dealcasters.live. Thanks again for listening, and you know the deal. Don't fear the gear.